So, what's the possibility of having a shared universe at Netflix with comics? It's what Mark Miller, has signed a deal to do, but we haven't really seen much evidence of that. In fact, there's been a lot of just kind of waiting and delays while we've been waiting for things like Jupiter's Legacy and Huck and some of these other comics to come out. So, is the idea a bust at this point, or is it still in play? Hey everybody, this is Perch, and every once in a while I get asked what's going on with Mark Miller. He signed this deal with Netflix. There's a bunch of hype about it, but it feels like that was like 50 years ago, especially, given that 40 of those years were in the last month, basically, with everybody on lockdown. But wouldn't a nice Miller World connected universe be pretty nice to see on Netflix right about now? I mean, I don't know about you, but this last season of Westworld, I'm like, just get with the robots killing the humans already. God. Anyway, uh, I think that Mark Miller signed this deal, and his intention was he's going to bring these Miller World properties to Netflix, and Netflix did this in large part because Marvel had their whole world. We knew that we're going to get Disney Plus at some near point. We believed that HBO was probably going to get the DC stuff or some kind of Warnerverse kind of world. And Netflix didn't want to be locked out of the whole superhero genre. They wanted to still be able to play in it and be able to make money off of it. So that's where they basically signed the deal with Miller, and Miller was a great salesman promoting himself and his services and what he could do, and this idea of this kind of shared universe. And so thus a deal was born. But then it got very quiet for a while, and part of this is just when this deal was announced. I think a lot of people who are comic readers have this kind of strange built-in expectation that, from deal is announced to, movie on your screen is like 4 months, and in reality, it's much longer than that. It did seem to get off to a slow start. I'm not entirely sure why, but it seemed like it took a long time for things to kind of get trucking and get rolling and figure things out. And then and part of it was hampered by Mark Miller, in promoting himself and what he was doing, made these comments about things like the Magic Order are being written as Netflix shows, that they're being written with that in mind. But in reality, it wasn't a sure bet that these would become Netflix shows. It just assumed that they would. And they were promoted in some cases in the comics as coming to Netflix, but it was really almost a pitch to Netflix in comic book form. They weren't necessarily going to happen for sure. But things are happening. I think Jupiter's Legacy is probably the one that is making more progress. Stardust and or Starlight. Too many. Neil Gaiman did Stardust, and it was Starlight anyway. And Huck is there, and a couple of the other books. They are coming, but it's unclear. How much more time we're going to have to wait with the virus and filming being closed down and other things. I think it's highly unlikely that we see one of these Miller World projects actually show up on Netflix for at least until 2021. I don't think it's coming this year. I may be wrong about that. In fact, let me go check real quick just for laughs. Yeah, no. I went actually looked at the at news, and there isn't any new news. In fact, to give you a sense of the time, it was 2017 when the acquisition of Miller World came out, and in 2018 there were some stories about kind of the first slate of series that were being looked at and could potentially move to series. But since that time, there's been a lot more about Netflix doing deals with IDW, with Boom, Lumberjanes coming, these kinds of other sweet tooth series that are outside of Miller. And so you got to wonder, so when is the Miller World stuff coming? And there at least is some belief, some suspicion that a bunch of it is going to get filmed so that there's a pretty continual clock of every 4 months or so, there's a new part of this far-reaching kind of Miller World series that is going to be happening. But we're still waiting for that to begin, and it's unclear when it is going to begin. I stand by my estimate. I don't think it's coming in 2020. I think we're at 2021 at the very least for things like American Jesus and some of these other series that are in there. But it begs the question: is the gold rush for streaming over? Is the idea of a shared universe over? And I think that To some extent, it is, which is probably a surprise for people to hear me say that. But whereas Marvel was very successful with the shared universe, we immediately saw copycats with the Universal, the World of Monsters shared universe, and then DC was going to have a shared universe, and it became very popular to say we're going to do a shared universe. But then nobody really was able to accomplish that beyond Marvel. And part of it's because you have to be in it to win it for the long term. The Marvel movies started out strong, but they were not massive successes. They were profitable. They were successes, but if you look at them through today's lens, if you were expecting a lot of those initial 5, 6 Marvel movies were all going to make more than $1 billion, well, they didn't. That's not how it worked. Iron Man made a ton of money. Iron Man 2, they all made great money. But the problem for other studios was they're all now being judged through the lens not of how the Marvel Universe got started, but where the Marvel Universe is today. And that's an almost impossible thing to do right out the gate. I remember reading the Universal, the Multiverse of Monsters, whatever they're called, the Shared Monsterverse, the Dark Universe. I remember, they got Tom Cruise in there for the first one. They were going to do a bunch of really big things. And there was expectations that was going to make $1 to $1.5 billion. Of course, it did not, and I think most people could have predicted that. But the fact that it made decent money but well underperformed meant that this whole shared universe people started to look at very critically, and soon the articles are being written that shared universes are going to take a lot of planning, a lot of logistics, and might not ever make the money that people are hoping they'll make. And therefore, it's better to just go for the business as we know it. It's kind of a classic, people tried and then they pulled back, but they didn't try enough to really get it going. So the idea that Netflix is going to really push a shared universe, or that any comic creator is going to kind of get their own MCU going, is probably a big long shot right now. Nobody's going to want to invest that kind of money on an unknown. And unfortunately, it's all unknown at this point. If you're not Marvel and you're not DC, it is unknown. Even if the image creators came together and said, we're going to have a Savage Dragon, Spawn, Youngblood in a shared universe, it'd be impossible to do at this point. But if that's what you were pitching, it still wouldn't have the brand recognition and push that the DCU or MCU has. And those two efforts were 50% successful in terms of really creating that shared universe. Over complexity is seen as a drawback. It's too much effort, too much money for questionable return. So I don't think that the goal of a shared universe is nearly where it was when all the buzz was going on a couple of years ago. And in fact, if anything, I think more often than not, studios are just looking to get a quick win and to find safe ways to put their money. I think that's where things are going. So, what does all this mean? Miller World, shared universes, Netflix. I think that right now, where Miller World's concerned, we got to get that first series out the gate and hope it does well, hope that the interest is there in order for a lot more to be made. I think the fact that it's been so quiet for so long is ominous. And I think the longer time goes, the less attractive any of that stuff's going to be. And we'll see if any of it actually makes it to screen. In terms of other producers, I think you've got to hit the home run with your first film before you start doing anything in that shared universe. And I think a lot of writers are going to start to take the approach of just, go safe, make something solid, put some Easter eggs or some teasers in there that will allow you to do more, and call it a day. And that's the best that you can do. And probably the smartest business decision you can make. But what do you think? Shared universes, are they still viable or not? Leave me a comment below. Let me know what you think. And subscribe, click the bell for notifications if you want to be bothered. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.